What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today we have a lot of exciting news coming out with regards to Diablo 4 Season 2, the Season of Blood. Now, they just had the developer campfire chat yesterday, so if you haven't seen that video, it is pretty lengthy, but I would highly suggest that you go and check it out, and then come back over here because I'm going to be talking about the vampiric power system, more specifically how it's implemented and the powers as we see them at first glance with the information that we were given yesterday, as well as this really nice concise recap they have here. So let's get right into this video. So as you can see here, we're right here on the Blizzard main page under the news section for Diablo 4, and it gets right into it. Bite down on darkness in Season of Blood with a pretty terrifying looking graphic here of our barbarian, sorceress, and druid. And this first paragraph really goes over the basics of the season, when it's going to be launched on October 17th at 10 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time, which I believe is noon time Eastern Standard Time where I'm from. And then it also talks about patch 1.2 going live on the launch of the season, and to stay tuned on October 10th because, man, they have even more information coming out from the devs on class balance, new unique items, sweeping changes to resistances, and a great deal of other quality of life updates and bug fixes. Holy cow, guys, this season is going to be massive. And not only does it make me excited for this season, but it makes me even more excited for Season 3, Season 4, Season 5. I really hope they continue to grind for these seasons and give the community what they're asking for. So let's get right in. Down here, this basically just gives us a brief summarization of the how the season came to be, right? It's just the storyline. So we're not worried too much about that. We'll find out more about that when we actually get to play the Season 2. But here is the meat and potatoes of this video. Vampiric powers and the new packed armor system. So scrolling down further, we find out that we're going to be slaying monsters to get potent blood, which we then utilize to unlock, and there will be a random component to this, but unlock vampiric powers as well as upgrade those same vampiric powers. Now, this is a big quality of life change over the Malignant season we're currently in, because right now we're just kind of looking for those, you know, random elite malignants that drop our malignant hearts, and then obviously randomly get a specific malignant heart from that. But here, we're actually just able to slay everything. So a lot of fun here, just killing things and getting a lot of potent blood. And then it does say that there will be a seasonal questline element to be announced at a later date. So probably on that next developer campfire chat video. Going down further, it tells us that the potent blood that we're going to be using is going to unlock our powers to a higher level at a maximum of level 3. Now, the powers listed in this article below, all 22 of them, are listed at their highest level of power. So we'll get to know exactly what we're getting at the highest level to give us a better idea as to what we can target for leveling up. And then also that we can have a maximum of 5 powers equipped to our characters at any given time. So that's quite a few powers, and some of these powers are really, really strong. So it looks like this is going to have a big impact on our overall character builds going into Season 2. And that each vampiric power will have a symbol associated with it with a total cost for that power in order to equip that power. And that's how the packed gear system is going to be utilized in this season. So going down further here, this is where we really start to understand our packed armor system and how it affects our vampiric powers. So it basically starts off showing us an example of a set of gloves here. And this glove has 3 symbols associated with these gloves. And I'm going to assume that when our armor drops in the game, it's going to have a random associated amount of symbols to it. And it tells us that ferocity, divinity, and eternity are represented by these 3 symbols. And I'm going to assume that the ferocity is this red thorned crown looking symbol, divinity is the classic golden chalice symbol, and then eternity is the undead vampiric skull symbol here with a crown. And these armor pieces, the gloves, the boots, the pants, the chest, and the helmet, are basically going to build up a pool of symbols that we can later subtract from when equipping our vampiric powers. And this is explained a little bit here by a small example in the article. And I'm going to go ahead and read it and then give a visual interpretation of this example. So it says, let's use the above legendary gloves as an example. They provide 1 Ferocity, 1 Divinity, and 1 Eternity packs. If you have a vampiric power that requires 1 Ferocity to activate, then this item alone covers the requirement and you still have 1 Divinity and 1 Eternity available. If you equipped a second vampiric power that requires both 1 Divinity and 1 Eternity to activate, the boots still provide enough packs to activate both powers. So this sounds like to me a pretty simple system, but for those visual learners, we're going to go ahead and draw this out. So F for Ferocity, D for Divinity, E for Eternity with a little line here. And we have 1 of each from our gloves and our boots, right? Because that's what the example said. And we have 2 vampiric powers. So vampiric power 1, and it costs 1 Ferocity, and then vampiric power 2, and that costs 1 divinity and 1 eternity. So our pool currently is 1 ferocity, 1 divinity, 1 eternity. Our first vampiric power costs 1 ferocity to equip, so we go ahead and subtract that 1 point here from our ferocity table, and we get a big 0, so nothing left for ferocity. And then vampiric power, we have costs 1 divinity and 1 eternity for our second one. So we go ahead and subtract 1 here, subtract 1 here, and we have now utilized our entire pool of symbols that we had built up from our gear pieces. So basically what this tells me is that our gear pieces build up a pool of symbols for us to subtract from when equipping our vampiric powers. And like it said previously, you can have up to 5, and each one of those levels up to 3 levels. So pretty simple system in my opinion. I don't think there'll be much of a learning curve in terms of people getting used to this system, but it is a little bit more complex than just taking Malignant Heart and putting it into an accessory piece. Going down further, we find out a massive quality of life change over Season 1 here. So it says customize pack armor to your needs. So in this current season, if we got a really cool ring or a really cool amulet, it may have a malignant color that we don't really need, right? So it basically almost cuts the value of that item in half. In this season, they're going to have consumables that allow us to place the symbols we want on those gear pieces, as well as remove symbols we don't want. So that is a huge, huge, huge quality of life change. This is going to make players so much happier with the system as a whole. And then going down further, we're getting into the actual 22 vampiric powers we're going to be talking about for this video. And as I stated previously, like the article says, the below values reflect each vampiric power at the maximum level 3. So let's go ahead and talk about it. So we start off with the minor vampiric powers, which are the bulk of the vampiric powers. And I believe there are 16 of these. And these require 1 to 3 packs to be able to use them. So let's start off with the first one. Anticipation costs 1 divinity, so pretty cheap. Your ultimate skills gain 20% cooldown reduction. Your ultimate skills gain 12% increased damage for each nearby enemy affected by your damage over time effects. So, my goodness, just starting off, this is an insane vampiric power. Not only do you get to 20% cooldown reduction, but then you get a damage increase to enemies that are affected by damage over time effects, which I play a druid, and that is a massive, massive vampiric power for that class. Then Covenant of Fangs, it costs 2 divinity. Your Conjuration, Companion, Minion, and Bat Familiar attacks deal 52% increased damage to crowd-controlled enemies. Lucky Hit, your Conjuration, Companion, Minion, and Bat Familiar have up to a 30% chance to inflict Vampiric Curse when hitting enemies. So at first glance, I'm not really too feel too strong about this specific vampire power. I mean, 52% increased damage, but the enemies have to be crowd controlled. And then there's a lucky hit component, which I don't necessarily like how lucky hit is implemented into the game currently. So this second power doesn't seem like it's that big of a deal to me. Domination costs 1 ferocity here on this third one. You deal 24% increased damage to enemies who are stunned, immobilized, frozen, or feared. If they're also injured and not an elite, they're instantly killed. So this is probably like one of those maybe not vampiric powers, because the enemies have to be under specific CC effects, stunned, immobilized, frozen, or feared. I think that limits what you can use this power for. It may be good for some builds, may not be so good for others. And then Feed the Coven, 1 eternity. Lucky hit, conjuration, companion, minion, and bat familiar attacks have up to a 60% chance to restore 10 primary resource to you and increase your damage by 10% for 4 seconds. Again, something under a conditional like lucky hit. With the way lucky hit is currently implemented as a druid, this doesn't sound too crazy for me. I definitely wouldn't, build a companion build around utilizing this specific vampiric power as I'm seeing it at first glance without using it. Heretic costs divinity, 3 divinity. For every 5 basic skills you cast, one of your active cooldowns is reduced by 2 seconds. So this sounds pretty good to me in terms of my specific class, right? So druid, if you have a crone staff, 5 basic skills, so 5 basic attacks, and then you basically reduce a cooldown by 2 seconds. That's a really easy conditional to meet, and that can actually, combined with the anticipation here with a 20% ultimate skill cooldown, you could probably cool down your ultimate super fast. I mean, if you're a lightning storm druid, my goodness, like you're going to be able to pop off your ultimate cataclysm over and over and over again pretty fast. So that sounds pretty good so far in terms of my perception of the game. And then Hemomancy, 3 eternity. Your attacks deal 80% of your maximum life as physical damage to nearby enemies. This can occur once every 4 seconds. You heal for 1% of your maximum life for each enemy damaged this way. So this sounds pretty cool. I think it's a nice way of allowing those characters with a tankier, higher health pool to, just increase their damage. And it's every 4 seconds, so it doesn't seem like it's that, I think that's the part that gets me. This can occur once every 4 seconds. I don't know how useful it'll be. I think there are probably going to be other vampiric powers that you can utilize. But again, this is without actually playing the game. Infection costs 1 ferocity. Hitting enemies with direct damage inflicts them with pox. Inflicting pox 8 times on an enemy expunges their infection, dealing 70% poison damage. So this sounds pretty cool. Direct damage, another modifier there, but seems like it might be useful. And then Jagged Spikes, 1 ferocity, 1 divinity. Thorns have a 10% chance to deal 300% increased damage and chill enemies for 8%. So, again, if you're a Thorns player, that's pretty good. A 10% chance doesn't seem too significant, but when you're getting hit by a lot of enemies, it might pop pretty frequently. So this might be good for those Thorns build players. Anybody who likes the Thorns, that might be really good for you guys. Prey on the Weak, 2 ferocity. You deal 60% increased damage to vulnerable enemies. Enemies are vulnerable while affected by a vampiric curse from your vampiric powers. Now, this sounds really good on its surface, but do remember they are making changes to how vulnerability works, so I don't know how this will be affected. So keep that in mind when we're talking about these specific skills. We don't know the class balance changes that they're going to be implementing, and so it could dramatically change what we actually use in terms of vampiric powers for our builds and how we play the game as a whole. So I do expect the second video to really kind of expand upon these vampiric powers and how we'll be able to use them in the game. So just take everything here with a grain of salt when you read them, okay? And how you plan to build around them, because it could dramatically change with the class balance changes and some of the things that they're going to implement when they announce them in the next video. And then Rampart, 1 divinity, 1 eternity. After not moving for 3 seconds, you gain a barrier for 40% of your maximum life for 6 seconds. This effect can occur once every 20 seconds. Sounds pretty terrible. Ravenous, 3 ferocity. Hey, actually, let's go back. Anytime you tell me I have to stand still for 3 seconds or any amount of time, I automatically just don't want to do it, because I like to move fast, I like to play fast, and standing still is not my cup of tea. So if that's for you, cool. For me, I'm not standing still, so I don't ever think anything like that is useful. Ravenous, 3 ferocity. Lucky hit, up to a 20% chance to increase your attack speed by 40% of your total movement speed for 6 seconds. Okay, this sounds pretty cool because I believe movement speed cap is 200%. So if you got 40% of that, you're going to be attacking really fast. But again, this lucky hit, just the way lucky hit is currently implemented, you know, I tend to I like building out lucky hit, but I always kind of this is one of those that you're actually going to have to utilize, like play with, before you actually understand how good this is. It sounds pretty good, but with the lucky hit, we'll see how much it can proc, and also can it be refreshed during the duration of the attack speed increase, because if it can be refreshed during the duration of the attack speed increase, it's pretty good. But if it can't be refreshed, then it tends to be a lot worse, because you have to proc that every 6 seconds to get it 100% uptime. Then resilience, 2 eternity. You gain 1% damage reduction for each 2% life you are missing. So that sounds pretty good. I mean, obviously not if you're at 100% of your life missing, but it sounds pretty good. Up to, what is that, 48% damage reduction before you're dead. So that it does sound really good. Sounds pretty good, especially for those low health builds. Or you can stack damage reduction while injured, and then this further reduces that damage. So I think that sounds pretty good overall. And then Sanguine's Brace, 1 divinity and 1 eternity. When you kill an enemy, fortify for 6% of your base life. While you have more fortify than half of your maximum life, you gain 8% critical strike chance. So this sounds really good, actually, because a lot of fortify builds, fortify is pretty easy to obtain. And when you have half of your max life as fortify, which is, you can build your entire life bar with fortify pretty easily, 8% critical strike chance, that's pretty significant. I mean, it's already hard enough to get a lot of critical strike chance, but 8%, I feel like that's almost a go-to vampiric power here for any builds that utilize fortify, which I play a druid, so that's basically every build for a druid. Then Terror, we have 1 ferocity, 1 divinity, and 1 eternity. When struck, you have a 14% chance to fear nearby enemies and slow them by 80% for 2 seconds. You are guaranteed to critically strike enemies who are feared. So this sounds pretty good, actually. When you're struck, you have a 40% chance to fear. You're hit a lot, and then slow them for 80% for 2 seconds, and then you just critically strike them. Sounds pretty good, especially for some of these other malignant hearts above. So this might actually be pretty useful for some builds. I can definitely see this. I don't know how well it would work if you were a Thorns build, because you want enemies to attack you, and this fears enemies and then slows them. So during a fear, they're not attacking. And then, of course, like bosses. A lot of my problems with some of these conditionals that are applied by crowd control effects is the unstoppable monsters and then obviously bosses. So it's like those basically lose all effect when you're fighting those enemies, and I just don't really see the value in having, unless you're that person who loves to just build out a bunch of different sets. If you're just looking for that one set that does pretty much everything, these kind of take a back seat to to a lot of the other powers that I've already read about. Undying, 1 eternity. Casting skills heals you for 3% life. Double this bonus while below 50% life. So seems like we're getting a nice mixed bag here of a lot of damage modifiers, as well as some survivability vampiric powers. I mean, goodness. I mean, casting skills he'll use for 3% life. You get double at 50% life. That's pretty significant, especially if you combine that with the where is it at? With resilience here, 1% damage reduction for each 2% of your life missing. You're basically not dying with damage reduction while injured, resilience, and undying. It seems like you just can't die. I mean, those seem pretty powerful. And then getting into the major vampiric powers here, 16 packs required. So we had all of the minor here, and now we're getting into the major vampiric powers. And sorry, I said 16, 6 packs required. And the first one here is Accursed Touch, 6 divinity. So a lot of divinity. It seems like these are going to be the ones that are going to basically pull almost the entire, amount of symbols you have under a specific symbol set. So Accursed Touch, 6 divinity. Lucky Hit, not a big fan already. Up to 44% chance to inflict vampiric curse on enemies. And mind you, this is max level. On enemies with vampiric curse have a 15% chance to spread it to other surrounding enemies. Accursed souls deal 20% increased damage. So really, if you're applying it with the lucky hit, you're probably going to apply it to everything else. And this second part just seems kind of unnecessary, or should have been something different. Because I mean, it just feels like I don't know how you're going to you're basically going to apply it to the target you hit, and if you hit anything else, I don't see how this 15% is really that good. But 200% increased damage is obviously really good. And then Bathe in Blood, 3 divinity and 3 eternity. While channeling a skill, you form a pool of blood beneath you. While channeling a skill in a pool, your channel skills deal 40% increased damage and you gain 30% damage reduction. A pool can only form once every 8 seconds. So this sounds pretty good from a Drew perspective. A Lightning Storm build, this could be usable. My only problem is the 8 seconds here, because honestly, you're moving, you're channeling your Lightning Storm, you're moving, you're channeling your Lightning Storm every 8 seconds. I don't know if it would be worth it if there are better vampiric powers down here. So, Blood Boil, 6 eternity. When your core skills overpower an enemy, you spawn 3 volatile blood drops. Collecting a volatile blood drop causes it to explode, dealing 60% physical damage around you. Every 20 seconds, your skill is guaranteed to overpower. This sounds pretty lackluster as well. I mean, just overpower every 20 seconds, you're guaranteed to overpower. It probably, I don't know, again, I don't necessarily think this is necessary for every 20 seconds. They could probably tone it down there. I don't know. Again, this is one of those you're going to have to utilize. But I'm sure that a lot of overpower builds are able to overpower pretty frequently, that every 20 seconds wouldn't be that big of a deal. But you never know. When you spawn 3 volatile blood drops, collecting a volatile drop causes it to explode, dealing 60% physical damage. It sounds okay, but if you have to literally travel out of your way to collect a volatile blood drop, as opposed to just continue going through the enemies, I don't know how well this will work in practice. Definitely one of those you're going to have to get your hands on and test out before you can make a definitive choice as to whether you want it or not. All right, so going down, we have Call Familiar. 3 ferocity, 3 divinity. Casting a mastery, weapon mastery, macabre, wrath, or imbued skill calls a bat ally to attack nearby enemies, dealing 80% physical damage with a 30% chance to stun. So this basically means it's useless for a boss. I don't know how well this is going to scale 8% physical damage, and it doesn't really give us a time, like how long will this familiar last, or is it just just casting the skill calls it down? If it's just casting a skill, that's pretty cool, because then you just get that bonus damage from the bat flying down and hitting the enemy. But I don't know, so we'll see. We'll have another one of those you'll have to play and see. But doesn't sound too overwhelming. It sounds underwhelming in my opinion. Flowing Veins, 2 Ferocity, 2 Divinity, and 2 Eternity. You deal 60% increased damage over time to enemies that are moving or affected by a vampiric curse. I can see why that might be useful. in some builds. But again, not really sure how useful. Metamorphosis, 2 Ferocity, 2 Divinity, and 2 Eternity. When you evade, you turn into a cloud of bats, becoming unstoppable for 4 seconds. Enemies along your path take 160% physical damage and are inflicted with Vampiric Curse. Okay, I can see what that might be useful. I can see why it might be useful, but and kind of fun, just because you get unstoppable for 4 seconds and you get it during your evade. So I wonder though if you can attack while you're under this cloud, while you're a cloud of bats. Like, does this, when you cast evade, does it stop you from attacking and casting spells only to become a cloud of bats? Or can you still do your normal actions while being a cloud of bats? Because if you can still do your normal actions, it would be pretty good, right? You're unstoppable for 4 seconds. You can get the boots that decrease cooldown as you utilize your basic attack as you attack, and you'll basically be able to be unstoppable forever. But if you can't really utilize your skills during this cloud of bats, I don't see how this will be very useful. And then Moonrise, 6 Ferocity. Hitting an enemy with a basic skill grants you 4% attack speed for 10 seconds, stacking up to 5 times. So we get up to 20% attack speed. Upon reaching maximum stacks, you enter a Vampiric Blood Rage, gaining 160% basic skill damage and 15% movement speed for 10 seconds. So this actually sounds really good for any druids. And again, I'm speaking from a druid perspective. This actually sounds really good for any druids utilizing the Crone's Staff, because I feel like you're just going to be able to build that up so fast, and then you're going to be moving faster and getting crazy amounts of basic skill damage. So overall, I think the major vampiric powers do sound a bit underwhelming in terms of what they offer compared to some of the minor vampiric powers. I will say this is all subject to change based on the different class balances they're going to be implementing in the game. But as I currently see it, I do feel like you're probably going to be stacking out a lot more of your minor vampiric powers and not so much of these major powers. But again, you have to wait and see when the season 2 actually launches, so we can get our hands on those major vampiric powers to test them out. But overall, it looks like a really promising patch. I'm pretty excited to get to get a hold of this system and try to really build out a new character for this season. But that's really it for the video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found this video informational. I hope I did a good enough job explaining this out to you and kind of giving my insights as to the new vampiric power system. If you enjoyed the video, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe. That really helps me out. We're close to that 100 subscriber mark, and that's a big goal for me. I am at NicoRex on Twitch TV, at NicoRex on YouTube. And with that being said, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day or night, depending on wherever you're from, and peace out. See you in the next one.